You're watching Enterprise Nation TV with O2 Business.
Business was straight out of university.
It was.
That's when you first started your business. So why did you make that decision to come straight out of university and go straight into entrepreneurship rather than get a normal job?
Well, to be honest, I think my mother would have wanted me to go into the post office and work their entire career and then retire, but as a pension. But my father, when I was in my, I'd say, impressionable ages, 13 to 15, started up a company, started out on his own, and I looked at that and I said, you know, I really like that. I'd like to be able to start something of my own and get involved with my own company. So when I left university, I studied mathematics and computer science, and I did a lot of graduate level software programming, and they say ignorance is bliss. And somebody asked me at a dinner party whether I could design a single board computer that would monitor oil and gas wells, and I said I could. And within a week, this was a principal out of a large oil and gas company in Denver. They wrote a check for $25,000 to fund the company, and we developed a line of single board computers that were industrialized that you could put out in an oil field, and you could monitor oil and gas fields at that stage and bring the data all back into their headquarters. And you have to remember, this was in the early 80s. At that stage, they didn't have automation out in the oil fields. They actually drove out with their trucks and measured tanks with a dipstick instead of going out or instead of having it fully automated. So that was the idea. The company did pretty well. It was acquired by Baker Oilfield Services, and so before I was 25, I'd started a company, built it up, and then sold it.
So you then moved on to the next, one, Novanet, and raised $60 million. So what did you sort of take from that very first business that you then maybe did differently when you moved on to the next one? What were the sort of lessons you took?
Well, it's interesting when you look back now, because all of these companies are a piece of the puzzle for what I do today, and they're all interrelated, and they all have to do with almost the same thing. In Cipher Systems, we were building single board computers, but we couldn't get the data out of the oil field. And so when we had sold that company, I started Novanet, and Novanet was a satellite-based system that would allow us to take data out from remote oil fields and bring it back in. So I actually came up with and patented a way to use very small aperture satellite terminals and communicate from point A to point B anywhere in the US. And I could connect into these remote terminals that we had built in Cipher Systems, and we had two-way communication. The problem with that is there was a monopoly called AT&T, and you weren't allowed to compete with AT&T at that time. So I actually got one of the first bypass licenses from the Federal Communications System that would allow me to set up an alternative network, and that alternative network became Novanet. And then Novanet actually was sold because they wanted the bypass license that would allow them to build a telecoms company that could compete with AT&T. Conversely, what I'm doing now, which is helping to exploit licenses, build communications companies that are competing with the incumbent carriers. But Novanet, what I really learned at CityFibre that would be applicable to Novanet was, first of all, if you have a vision and you work on it and stay true to it, you can make it happen. And it was an interesting case because in Novanet's case, was young, sub 26 years old, and in today's environment you have all these young billionaire entrepreneurs, but there's a very famous venture capital firm worldwide. It's called Apax. It's founded by a gentleman by the name of Alan Patrikoff. And Alan Patrikoff out of New York made his single largest investment with a under 30-year-old CEO, and that was me, and it was only $6 million. And today you hear about companies getting funded and they're 19-year-old and they have hundreds of millions. But at that time, Apax, which is one of the biggest companies, the largest amount of financing it ever did with an under 30-year-old CEO was me. So it was quite an interesting story. Now, actually, Novanet led me to Europe, and how I've been in Europe for this long, because when Novanet got purchased, it led me to the next company, which was ESAT Telecom, which I became one of the founders in, or one of the principals. I actually wrote its business plan and ran it. And the reason that the founder or the owner of a radio station contacted me is he wanted to get in the telecoms business, and he knew an Irish friend, the way the Irish work, knew an Irish friend in the FCC in the U.S. and that individual said, well, I know this young entrepreneur that knows how to get licenses and start companies in the communications field. His name's Greg Mesch, and I think he might be interested in doing something. I know he just sold his company. And so I got a call out of the blue from an Irish gentleman named Dennis O'Brien, which is now the richest man in all of Ireland. At the time, he just owned a small radio station, but now he's made all his money and his empire off of ESAT, and almost off of the work that I did. However, what he did is he asked me if I'd come to Ireland on a 30-day contract to help him set up a telecoms company. And I came over in '93. I was their second employee, wrote the business plan, and the rest is history. I stayed 5 years, built one of the largest fixed line carriers in Ireland, and it was then purchased by BT, and that is BT Ireland today. It was off of the founding of ESAT.
I mean, there's a lot of talk, as you probably know at the moment, about unicorns. You know, the £1 billion. That's the term that's been given to the business is valued at $1 billion or pounds, depending on what country you're in. And obviously, BT ended up buying ESAT for $1 billion. I know it's a very hard question, but that's the ultimate thing that entrepreneurs that read our stuff are trying to get to become this unicorn. What do you think has been key to your success that's helped you create businesses that are worth that kind of money?
Well, I've been lucky enough to have two businesses, Versatel and ESAT. Both were purchased for over $1 billion, and I believe CityFibre, and I know the people in CityFibre, and people ask, we have ambitions to build £1 billion company. But I think that the true art of it is not to focus on building £1 billion company, but is to build a very valuable company, and whether that is revenue growth and margin growth and free cash flow, those are the things. And if you build a really good, well-running company, then good things will happen to you. And what are good things that will happen? Well, it could go public, it could be purchased, it could be acquired, it can be merged, all those other things that create the value. But to chase a valuation, I think, is wrong. To drive towards building a company that is really providing high quality services that people want to pay for, that creates a real profitable, if you might say, or efficient company that's well run. If an entrepreneur concentrates on that, then the achievement of a £100 million company or a £500 million company or a £1 billion company will come, because it's the company itself, not the chasing of being worth $1 billion. Who knows? CityFibre could be worth $500 million, it could be worth $1 billion, it could be worth $10 billion in a few years, but it won't be worth anything unless we run it well. And that starts with a management team with a strong vision, and then implementing that vision rigorously. And that there's anything I've learned over my 5 years, it's and the art of true entrepreneurial is to be able to take a vision but then implement that vision in a rigorous way.
So on to CityFibre, which is why we're here today. So how did that happen? Do you want to explain what CityFibre is?
Well, I've been involved in the fiber industry for a long time, and in the European fiber space since '93. 8 years ago, I was asked to come over into London and help to reorganize a fiber operator that was based in London. EU Networks. I sat on its board and I helped them reshape their business plan and their management team. And one of the things we realized, now we've always known this about the UK, is that the only place that got a significant amount of competitive fiber infrastructure was London. So you have 100 secondary cities that are making up almost 35% of the population and something like 45% of the industrial output that never really got competitive fiber infrastructure. So when I was working at that company, we thought, how could we take advantage of that? And this is 10, 15 years after the boom period. Nobody was building infrastructure, and nobody would fund somebody to build infrastructure. So what we looked at is, how do we get into the mid-tier towns across the UK? Because we know that they need a digital infrastructure. We know they need an upgrade. What we did is we spotted an acquisition. The company I was with, sitting on the board, couldn't move quick enough, so I asked permission to do it myself. So I put together a group of capital. The capital comes all the way back from ESAT and Versatel, so they've been with me. We put together £5 million, and we made a acquisition of a distressed company building fiber networks in these second-tier cities. So we leaped or jumped into that space with one acquisition, and then we reinvented the model that they were doing, and that's the model today of CityFibre. So now CityFibre is expanding out throughout all of these cities, and it's a simple principle. We come in and we anchor into these cities, we open up that infrastructure, and we provide, as we like to say, up to 100 times the speed for 40% less than what BT OpenReach can do. It's a simple model. And you can do that because it's pure fiber infrastructure throughout those cities. And we know that all those cities need 2 or 3 fiber infrastructure providers, because every major capital city around the world has 2 or 3 or 4 fiber providers in those cities.
So, I mean, we're in Bristol, so the launch of the Bristol part of this. Why Bristol? What has brought you, make this one of your cities?
Outside of London, it's the #1 digital and entrepreneurial hub of the UK. So it was always a key city for us. It was a target city for us. But we remember, we don't go in and build infrastructure where we don't have an anchor to take us in. So we've been working around getting those anchors, whether they're a business ISP that wants to anchor us in, or whether it's a public sector that wants to anchor us in. Now, the way we got into Bristol is we did a large acquisition, but with that came an anchor contract. So we have 100 sites, and we have somewhere close to 70 to 80 kilometers of network now in Bristol. So now we can take that anchor, and now we can launch into Bristol. So it was a perfect way to enter the city.
And you said you're like you did in the old days, taking on AT&T. Now you're taking on the BT, who you've previously sold to. What are you hearing from the old guys? Any sort of rumblings about the stuff you're doing?
Well, they hate us and love us, and it's not BT, because we don't compete with BT. We compete with BT OpenReach, but OpenReach needs a competitor, and if they don't have a competitor, then they're going to get broken up and spun out, and they're going to have bad things happen to them. So in a way, the senior team in BT OpenReach knows that having a CityFibre competitive infrastructure out there is healthy for them. It increases their quality of services and lowers their price. Without us, you don't get an increased quality of service. They don't respond quick, they don't do anything quick, and they won't drive their prices down. So they need us, the cities need us, and we all know that. But on the ground, they hate us, of course, because they hate competition, because they and all incumbents around the world, they have this feeling that they own the market.
And just finally, it's a hard point, but I'll back onto the advice. If you had to give one tip to a small business owner or aspiring entrepreneur watching this, based on your experience, what would it be?
Well, they're different, an entrepreneur versus a small business owner. A small business owner, the tip I'd give him is to concentrate on running a really solid business. Don't get carried away with extravagance. Don't get carried away with much other than what does it take to sell something to someone, and how much profit do I get out of it, and can I pay the bills and the overhead, and the more that you do that, the more it cycles, the bigger it can get, and the more. I think some of the greatest businesses, and Apple I think would be an example of that, Apple is one of the most simple. They have one of the most simple product sets. They don't have a complex product set at all. I mean, you go to an Apple store and you can see their entire product set on about 4 tables. And they're the largest company in the world. That's just about simplicity, but doing it really well. as an entrepreneur, and having been an entrepreneur almost my whole career, which, by the way, I didn't really design it to be an entrepreneur. I mean, it just happened. I like building companies. I like concentrating on the vision, and then taking that vision and implementing it in a business plan and into people, and then having people driven to succeed that, and just doing it on a real simple way. It's not complex. Staying true to what that vision may be, what offering you may have, what product sector you have, and what category, and keeping simple to that, and driving that through the organization, driving that through your small team or big team, because you can build some really big companies off of small principles and small concepts. I think that's the art.
After all, it's simple, really, at the end of the day. Greg, thank you very much.
Thank you.